Hello, here we are again with Vaping It's Not Smoking campaign, and now we have one of the very big ones. I must say that today I'm kind of in the middle of being the one making the interview and a fan. I'm so happy to have you here. We have Marewa Glover today. Actually, it's kind of like a dream from the channel. From the ones that don't know Marewa, she's from New Zealand. She's a public health academic specialized in smoking and cessation. Thanks to be with us. And for our audience, Marewa, that maybe they will not know you, tell us a brief about your work, what you do on this area.
Brief. It's been 30 years.
I know.
Yes, I started in public health 30 years ago, and smoking is the biggest killer in New Zealand. So I decided, well, that's the best use of my training. I trained in psychology and public policy. So I started working on that, and also smoking was the biggest killer of Māori people, Indigenous. So I wanted to work on that.
Actually, you said that, I have it here. You are Maori, you are part of that great culture, and the tobacco was affecting very bad the Maoris. Can you explain us a little what was the situation with your people, with the tobacco, and why?
Well, it's the same for Native American and Aboriginal people of Australia, the First Nations people in Canada. So with colonisation, tobacco was used as an item of trade, and in the early colonisation, and also when the missionaries came and the whalers, and so they used tobacco, and as they did alcohol as well, to trade for goods. And it's almost like they knew that it was addictive or dependency forming, and so they knew that people would become addicted to it, and then they wouldn't have to pay them cash, they could pay them in tobacco or alcohol. They, at that time, in Europe, the women didn't smoke, men smoked tobacco, pipe tobacco, and when they came to our countries, they also encouraged our women to smoke. So our women and men took up smoking tobacco in the late 1700s and early 1800s, 100 years or 120 years before European women even really started smoking. So the effects of smoking on women, you can see if you look at Indigenous women in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the US, that's where you see the long-term effects of generations of smoking among women. So Māori women, it used to be said that we had the highest lung cancer rates in the world for women, and that's because of that long history. The other negative effect was that both parents smoked, so we had high uptake among the children, our young people, and that's why we have much higher smoking rates still today.
New Zealand have a history with vaping, as we know. At the beginning, they banned vaping very early in a way to see what's the result of the science. Then they unlocked the ban, and then they start doing politics through harm reduction. As far as I understand, it have a lot to do with Maori people and their studies, and in that you are also involved. How was this process?
I guess when I came to the first GFN, I came to in 2015, and I went back. I met with the Ministry of Health, and started lobbying and trying to educate people that here is an option. We need to encourage people to switch from smoking to vaping. The Ministry of Health said, oh no, it's illegal, but it wasn't under the smoke-free legislation we had because it didn't exist. So they can't say it was illegal. There were no electronic cigarettes. What they also were saying was illegal was snus, and we all thought there was something in there about tobacco intended for chewing was banned, and so it wasn't illegal. They just said it was, and then anyway, people still switched to vaping and took it up anyway.
Even if New Zealand started with a very bad position towards harm reduction and vaping, in some moment they start changing their mind, and I know that there was evolution in vaping and Maori population.
So at first, the Ministry of Health was saying it's illegal, but people were importing the vaping devices for their own use, and then when they switched over, then they started helping their family and their friends to also switch to vaping. And among the first people we had, obviously some Māori people who were smoking who also switched to vaping. And one of those guys, QJ, he set up his own e-liquid manufacturing company, NZ Vapour. They're still going very well, and they've just, one of their e-liquids is a finalist in the World Vape Expo. Yep. And so he has a number of stores and is supplying e-liquid to New Zealand and Australia. So he began lobbying very early, and there were other Māori who got into the business early too.
How it changed the politics of the New Zealand authorities?
Yes, so the people who switched to vaping began to help others, and so despite what the government thought, people were switching, and more people switched to vaping. So it was kind of like it got away from the government. So many people were switching, and then that was proving to people that it worked as to help people stop smoking. By the time the government, the Ministry of Health got around to sort of looking into how shall we regulate this or ban this, too many people knew that why would you ban this? It helps people stop smoking. So many people have. And then there was a staff change at the Ministry of Health, and the new woman that took over that section, she particularly wanted to make Māori women, because we had the highest smoking rate, a priority, and it was clear that vaping was helping Māori women to quit as well. So she was quite supportive. And then they moved towards, discussions began around how would we regulate this, what do you allow, what don't you allow, and then there was a change of government, and everything just sort of stalled for a while. So it actually took quite a while from 2015. I think the legislation passed last year and came into force, so that was quite a long time.
You have made a lot of studies, and you have studied, I don't know them, I'm sorry, my English is not that good, but you made a lot of studies and you find a lot of stuff there. What of your research will you highlight on vaping? Well,
one of the concerns I always had was the high rate of smoking while pregnant among Māori women, and so I've been researching that since the 1990s or early 2000. So that was one of my priorities, and in my centre, which is funded by the Foundation for a Smoke-Free World, I funded a young man who is very innovative and uses video and has a big following on Facebook, and he was going to be doing his master's degree, and we talked, and he came up with an intervention to help Māori women stop smoking. So he focused more on sort of giving them traditional knowledge of the importance of being pregnant, of the focus on the baby, and just his method. And he also designed a traditional hair comb for them to wear, plus a chant or prayer to say, and he made an app to give them the knowledge. So his whole program, we funded the pilot of that, and it was very successful. So he's gone on, he's rolling his program out with the Ministry of Health's now funding some of that. So that was really impactful, highly successful program. Another study we did was at a Vape Expo we had in Auckland, and we surveyed the people who were at the expo. That really showed me, I guess, the importance of flavours. And we were also asking people, what will you do if they ban flavours? Because that was being discussed. And people, basically it was either they would maybe go back to smoking, or, well, they would vape what they could, but many would mix their own. And if you're going to regulate vaping and you want people to have good quality product, then preferably they're buying a product made in a clean environment, in a, you know, like QJ's manufacturing unit, rather than mixing at home in the bath or something, you know. So we could see from that survey that the flavors are very important.
You have received important awards, a lot of nominations, even if I'm not mistaken, once you were nominated as the Woman or Person of the Year,
New Zealander of the Year.
But also you have been suffer a lot of attacks. Tell us something about this.
So yes, I was a finalist in the New Zealander of the Year award, one of the most prestigious awards in New Zealand, and I was one of 3 finalists. I wasn't the winner of that, but to even be one of 3 in the whole country was a immense honour, and that really annoyed the anti-vaping people. They were so beside themselves with anger. They complained about that to the organisation that does those awards. So they've been attacking me for a long time though, because they're pushing very harsh policies. You know, we have the highest tax on tobacco in the world relative to income. We have, lots of places where you can't smoke. Then they brought in fines that if you smoke in the car when anyone under 18 is present, you could be fined. And smoking is concentrated among people, among the lower income groups. So I could start to see that the tobacco control policies were doing harm themselves. Well, a harm reduction approach is not just about getting somebody to switch from a potentially harmful behaviour to a less harmful or safe behaviour. It's also about critiquing and challenging policies that are going to do another sort of harm or harm as well. That's part of harm reduction. So the people in tobacco control who are prohibitionist and not harm reduction, it was kind of them against me, and they wanted to get rid of me. So I did end up having to leave that university I was at. Went to another university, and then after GFN 2015, I began lobbying for vaping. So yeah, they've just continued to sabotage my work and try and discredit me and tell lies about me. So it's anything to stop me.
So you needed to pay a hard cost for standing over harm reduction.
Yeah.
Now in Latin America, there is the process of legislating or regulating over vaping. If you were able to send a message for the people that is in charge of making the regulations, what you will tell them?
They have to be very careful when they look at the science. So the anti-vaping people in tobacco control, the prohibitionists, they have written a lot of science that is anti-vaping. It is not very good science. Some of it is outright lies. So it's a strategy they've used to publish many papers saying vaping does this and it does that. So regulators really need to get a very strong and excellent scientist to help study that science and look at the biases, look at the methodology and identify this is not robust, and look at only really strong science, not just there's 100 papers that say this and there's 10 that say that, so the 100 papers win. They're very poor quality. They should never have been published, many of them.
About that, what are the studies from the bad science, I'm meaning, that it shocks you when you review them? Like, this is totally untrue. Can you just tell some? Because maybe some of the politicians that are working on that, they will hear some of the stuff that are there in this trash can of science. Like some of them only that you remember now that they were totally false.
Well, there are many papers published in scientific journal articles that are actually only opinion pieces. So there's no research. It's just their opinion. So, pretty much you can leave those out. And then there are a lot of papers that are a literature review. So they say they've reviewed all the evidence and this is the result. They have not reviewed all the evidence. They have picked the studies that confirm their own bias. So many of those are not robust and you put them aside. And then one of the famous examples that people have been talking about at this conference, because it is quite a famous example, is a study by Stan Glantz of
heart attacks.
About heart attacks, saying that vaping causes heart attacks, but when you look at the data, the heart attacks occurred before people started vaping. And that paper was retracted, but it is still one of the most cited papers, even though it's been retracted. So the prohibitionists and anti-vaping people, they still cite that paper and many others like that.
What do you think about EVALI and heavy metals or formalides in electronic cigarettes? They fit this part of the science?
Yes, that was shocking because people died unnecessarily. If they had have been honest and been honest,
the truth.
Even at the beginning, they were being told by the patients sometimes that they had been vaping cannabis oil, and instead they were vaping, and they exploited that tragedy
until now
to say that it was vaping, all vaping. Now, some of those young people that died may not have died if they had focused in on, is something to do with vaping cannabis, what is it about vaping cannabis, and identified the contamination early on instead. So I think that's particularly shocking.
Mm-hmm. Well, Marewa, just the last question. It's vaping smoking?
Is vaping smoking? No, smoke is what comes out of your barbecue or your house, fire. Smoke is that tar and carbon monoxide. It comes from burning something. Vaping is heating a liquid. There is no combustion. It is not smoking.
Yeah, it sounds like a very strange question, but I want to say thank you to give us this time in our channel that it's called Vaping. It's not smoking. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And we will see you in the next interview. Again, Thank you, Marewa, for your time, and I hope you can continue enjoying GFN this year.
It's been great. Yeah.
Thanks
you.
a lot.